Next on the CrossFit Games Update Show, the dust has settled from 3 weeks of regional competition. In Spain, 2 Icelandic titans turned the Caja Mágica into their own personal battleground. Event 7 provided plenty of drama.
Here comes Cole Sager.
And heartbreak.
There's the touch.
Oh my gosh.
And Matt Fraser sends a message in the East.
Matt Fraser, unreal.
We have all the best moments and top performances from the regionals. The CrossFit Games Update Show starts now. Hi everybody, welcome to today's edition of the CrossFit Games Update Show. I'm Sean Woodland with a packed house. Tommy Marquez, Rory McKernan, and Pat Sherwood. Regionals are done. We've all had a chance to collect our breath, but maybe it's just because it's the most recent 3 weeks, but I think these last 3 weeks of regionals were the most exciting that we have had in a long time.
I just loved the test personally. Like I said, when these first came out, if you had told me these were the events we were going to see at the games, I'd have been a happy camper. They looked crazy and gnarly, and the athletes rose to the occasion, so I just enjoyed every performance, man.
Yeah, from where I got to sit on the floor, seeing the way that the fans reacted to the amazing performances. I'm so sorry I missed you. But yes, I think that everybody got exactly what they came for.
Yeah, it was a great event. Even for those who weren't able to make the games, they got a little bit of what it's like to be in that environment going to one of these regional events.
Yeah, speaking of games, we saw a matchup that it's going to carry over into Carson at the Meridian Regional. The battle between Annie and Sarah, I mean, those two, it's like the heavyweight fight where they go at each other during the weigh-in. They're not going to wait to get in the ring, and that's exactly what we saw at the regional.
It's always a sight to behold when you see 2 top athletes just really push each other to new heights in terms of performance. If you look at their stats, they're nearly identical across the board. But the one that really jumped out to me is that just 53 seconds separated these two across 7 events. That's a little over 7.5 seconds per event. And that's amazing given that Sarah, who edged out Annie, was on the competition floor for more than an hour and 12 minutes and still only separated by less than a minute.
One of the other cool things that happened at the Meridian Regional, and Ro, you and I were talking about this after day 1, it was like, okay, well, Sam Briggs is in trouble again. Will she be able to make a comeback? And then you blink, and then she's back in contention, and everything is fine.
Yeah, Jules Abigard from CrossFit Copenhagen 1 put it better than I could have said. And she told Sam after day 1, she's like, hey, I'm actually glad that this happened to you. And Sam was pissed. She's like, what are you talking about? And she said, well, now you have to swing for the fences. Like, nobody came to see safe Sam Briggs. And so with their back up against the wall, Sam Briggs pulls off virtually the impossible and makes an amazing comeback. And that's exactly what we want to see out of Sam Briggs. It tells me that in a year she says this is going to be her retirement year. She's bringing the heat, and she's still got it.
What if Katrin was still in that regional? How does that affect this whole thing?
Oh, man, that would have been a dream come true. That's the matchup I can't wait to see in Carson, but it's probably good for us in media because I don't know if anybody else would have watched another regional. That would have been the one to watch, no doubt.
Yeah, for that same reason, I'd almost say, like, I'm glad that it didn't happen because now it's all set up for the games. Last year, we were thinking about this amazing women's competition. Some people didn't make it back. Some people were not able to make it. And now we're going to see that collision happen in Carson.
And it's not apples to apples. You have to take this with a grain of salt. But if you take Katrin's score and you put it into the Meridian Regional, she ends up taking 5th with 559 points, just 1 point behind Sam Briggs for 4th. Turi Helgadottir's no rep on that last event becomes crucial and actually knocks her out of the games. Obviously, there's a ton of factors, but interesting food for thought.
And Sam Briggs wasn't the only athlete who made a pretty incredible comeback over 2+ days. There's a lot of big names on the list that you're looking at now, like Adkins was on there. Jacob Hepner, what he did, able to come back and get himself to the CrossFit Games. But that final event had a lot to do with that. And some of these comebacks were complete before that final event, but there was a ton of drama in event number 7.
You couldn't have scripted that any better, and the legless rope climbs were just such a monkey wrench. So on the final day of competition across all the regionals that went down, we had 14 people that were not in a qualifying spot, did event 7, did so well that then earned themselves a qualifying spot. It was 9 women and 5 men. Some crazy performances on the women. You had Tanel Reed, she went from 7th to 4th. You've got Carly Furr, Christy Aramo, they went from 7th to 4th, 7th to 5th. Then on the men's side of the house, some of the best. We had Gary Helmick go all the way from 8th to 5th, and then no one could beat this one. Cole Sager went from 9th place, basically had written him off to 5th just because of what he did in one event. So
I was back there.
It was nuts.
I got to see Ben Bergeron. Looked at him. He had this earnest conversation. I don't know what he said, but I called Ben. And I was like,
Go fast.
whatever you said to Cole Sager, call me every morning and say exactly what you said because he just knocked the pants off of that thing.
It was also cool to see some athletes who had been trying for multiple years to get to the games, and they just come up short. This year, they get to Carson.
Yeah, and too often we see the opposite of that. Athletes keep trying and they don't make it. But looking at athletes like Aaliyah Helmick, who the last 3 years has just been a few spots away from making it to the games, and she finally gets over the hump to qualify. And then you can't ignore Brent Fikowski. Just such an amazing performance from him across the board to win his regional. 5 top threes, 2 event wins, what was then an event record in number 5 with one of his former bugaboos in an overhead squat. And there's actually precedent for him to do well at the games. You look at Emily Bridgers, China Cho, spent a couple years not making it to the games, finally do. Both of them has finished as high as 6 now, so he could be a guy to watch out for in Carson.
Another guy who's trying to sort of break through, so to speak, is Matt Fraser, twice second place at the games, 2 years in a row. This year, was that one of the best performances that we have ever seen at regionals with the 5 event wins that he had?
Without a doubt it was. I mean, and again, it's tough to quantify what it is, but Fraser looked like he was there by himself competing. No one was even close to giving him a run for his money. And one of the things that really struck me was in an interview that he did, where he basically said, somebody was like, hey, what's driving you? What's motivating you to these great performances? And he said, not much really. I'm just trying to take advantage of the situation or environment that I'm in. And I called him today and I was like, hey, what did you mean by that? I'm like, because I interpret that as, I'm surrounded by these people I'm not normally, let's see what I can do. And he's like, yes, that, but then also, he said he took advantage of it by taking risks he wouldn't take in the games. He's like, at the games, I'm going to be really cautious that my hands don't tear. Or if my legs start to get pretty beat up, I'm going to slow down a little bit because it's such a long haul. He's like, at regionals, I just went for it. He's like, after the wall balls, for example, I did them so fast that I said to myself, I just messed my legs up. And I said, good. I want to see what I can do on day 3 when I don't feel 100%. So people are like, hey, I want to qualify at regional. He's like, this is a nice place for me to test a couple things.
So that was one of obviously the best performances, and there were a ton of great performances across these 3 weeks. But what are the ones that stood out the most to you, other than Fraser?
I mean, Josh Bridges is my big one. You know, he had a clear chip on his shoulder coming out of last year, missed qualification, and people especially looked at events number 1 and events number 5, and they said, oh, Bridges needs to redeem himself. We've got such short memories, and we forget that Bridges with the 405 deadlifts in 2013 actually wasn't that bad. He missed 2 reps, so we can call it a weakness, but he comes out, sustains a top 10 finish still in the snatch by PRing twice. When was the last time you PR'd twice in a row?
Been a bit.
Certainly not in competition
No.
when everything was on the line. And then he comes back with those heavy deadlifts, and he sets an event record at the time, takes first in that event, and just kind of really shows the world that he means business this year.
For me, I can't ignore the champ, Ben Smith, looking like he's just picking up where he left off at the games. You look at him coming into this event, he had 3 event wins, no finish lower than 7th. That's consistency across the board. He showed that at the games as well. He started and finished this regional event with a win, and he beat a guy in Noah Olson who had all the momentum in the world, coming off a win at Worldwide in the Open, winning his regional 2 years in a row. And even though his performances may not stack up with some of the other top athletes, Ben's a smart guy. He plays to the environment around him, so you know he's doing just enough to beat those guys and then save some in the tank for when it counts in Carson.
We have 40 teams going to the games, and a lot of really capable squads that we saw, throughout those 3 weeks that put up some pretty impressive performances. But if history is any indication, we can narrow this list down pretty quickly to the teams that have a legitimate shot of winning in Carson.
Absolutely, and you look at the point totals for some of these teams that just absolutely dominated their regions. You have Boise CrossFit Rainbow, one of the big surprises really, with 850 kind of blowing everyone else away in week number 2. Nordic OPEX, Diablo 822, Zax Pack, all of these teams have games experience. And like you said, is history's any indication, the eventual Affiliate Cup winner is going to come from this group. Obviously, I'll touch more on that on one of the Inside of Leaderboard segments, but you can definitely start to narrow it down.
Let's talk about the events themselves. We had 7 for the individuals, 9 for the teams. And I thought they were all great tests, but I thought the way that they were laid out really helped amp up the excitement that we got from the drama that is just naturally there from people trying to make it to the games on the final day.
Agree. They certainly crescendoed towards event number 7, but you can also look at the way that they were structured in such a different test, really resulted in much the same as it has in past years in terms of regional seeds who qualified. So very cool for me to see as the test is extended out over years, the same people qualifying even though the tests are different. In particular, though, what jumps out to me with what you're talking about, starting a little bit slower, was event number 2, Regional Nate, where to use a little bit of an analogy to our European friends, because I was over there,
very cultural.
It was like a soccer game for me, because you were like, is it going to, oh, it didn't quite make it, is it going to, oh, no, it didn't quite make it, and it made it that much sweeter when we watched Helga Daughter finish it for the first time. It was really, really cool. I don't know if you guys saw this on the broadcast at home, but she had her entire strategy written down in her hand. So every time she's coming back, she's checking the time, staying on point, and she was the first one to finish it. It was a tremendous performance.
My pace is down, so that's what's keeping me off the podium.
Yeah, whoops.
But not only that, but the events themselves, we can just say anecdotally amongst ourselves, oh, these are such tough events. But now that we can look back on them, we put over 600 individual athletes through these 7 events. we had time caps on events. The small pool of athletes that actually made it through every event without getting time capped is only 12 out of over 600 that went through. And how challenging is this? One of those people didn't qualify to the games. It's going to be Graham Holmberg, unfortunately, but that just speaks to how crazy this was. And every year, the test is a little bit above the athlete's capability, and they have to rise to meet that challenge. And man, the challenge was set very high, and the athletes grabbed it.
There was a lot of stuff that had us cheering, that had us feeling the drama and all the excitement. What were your favorite moments from the past 3 weeks?
I'm going to take it away from the competition floor and up into the stands, and especially in Europe. But I got to go to California, got to go to Portland, and got to go to Europe. And every single one, the affiliate community that comes to watch the CrossFit Games regionals is alive and well, to say the very least. And the same thing as the events, the regional weekends for me crescendoed to the end when we went to the Meridian. You got a taste of this as well. In the domestic regions, you've got multiple states coming. We had 22 countries represented just between the individuals and teams who were on the floor. So you can imagine what the stadiums look like with the flags all over the place, people singing songs, chanting, making just a complete ruckus. It was a blast, and the magic is definitely still there.
Well, every year we see a couple of athletes that really step up at regionals, relatively unknown before, and make a name for themselves. And those two athletes for me were Chandler Smith out in the Atlantic, and then Patrick Vellner. Chandler Smith starting, he's just one of those guys, his charisma really shone through on the floor, and it was never more evident in event number 5 when he tried to chase down the champ, basically acting like he didn't know who Ben Smith was and just ripping those 4 or 5 deads. It was something that was so moving, the crowd just instantly latched onto it and he became a fan favorite. Then Patrick Vellner, what a gutsy performance from him, tearing his bicep in the very first event, and he doesn't just go on to hold on and have kind of an okay performance. He's 3rd overall, he has an event win, an event record, and really I just hope from him that the timeline for his injury allows him to be 100% in Carson so we can see what he's really capable of.
It's got to be for me, Becca Voigt. Out in the California Regional, she didn't win the regional, but as far as I'm concerned, she stole the show with her 2nd place finish. She's 35 years old. This is our 10th year of the Games. This was her 9th qualification to the Games. No one else has that credential at all. 9 out of 10 games is ridiculous. And she even had an event win. She had nothing outside of the top 10. And you think about how the test has evolved every year. Very few athletes have evolved with it better than Becca Voigt.
It's one of the most impressive game stats I think out there.
Oh, no one's going to touch it, I think.
Yeah, well, the field is now set. We know the 40 men, 40 women, and 40 teams heading to Carson. You should get there too. As you heard Pat say, this is the 10th year of the CrossFit Games, perhaps the last time we are in Carson, California. A lot of history has gone down there, so if you hadn't had a chance to go to that venue, you want to make this the year you do it. Tickets are still available. Go to games.crossfit.com to get those. Hopefully we will see you there. We have a lot of business to take care of, though, in the following week, so we will be back with you multiple times to get you set for the 2016 Reebok CrossFit Games. Until then, for Pat, Ro, and Tommy, I'm Sean. We'll see you next time.